There is an Irish theologian, Garrigan, C-O-1 Garrigan, and she tells this story of doing some research and visiting a number of churches out in the smaller towns across Ireland's countryside. And she tells the story of walking into a Presbyterian church, and she is welcomed by this team of greeters. And they do such a good job, they want to know her name. And she kind of stands to the side and just watches this happen until she realizes that if you give a Protestant-sounding name, they welcome you in. We're so glad, and they help you find a seat. But if you happen to have a name like Maria or Catherine or Patrick, something that might be Catholic, they assure you that you are in the wrong space, and they walk you back outside and usher you towards the Catholic Church. Yes. Now, I would love to tell you that this is a really old story, but it was just published like 12 years ago. A lot could happen in 12 years, but a lot needs to happen in those 12 years too. Churches, Supreme Court decisions, people, we are not always as welcoming as perhaps we would like to think that we are, or perhaps that we could or should be. We are not able always to live into God's vision and dream of justice here on earth. The kingdom, and I'll say that again, the kingdom as in K-I-N, family, a vision of the world as a family versus the world as with a king leering over us and telling us what to do. But a kingdom is a big, big dream. And the practice of hospitality is simply about receiving someone or being received and shown basic dignity and decency. It's all that simple. I wish it were all that easy. I think it can be quite difficult sometimes. And of course, there's no one right or wrong way to give or receive hospitality. And yet, the foundations are always the same. At least from a Christian perspective, we know that as two entities come together for a meal or to offer shelter or for a cold cup of water, we know that as we approach that other person, such an interaction speaks volumes as to who we are and who we follow and how we want the world to be. And on an individual basis, some of us are pretty good at offering hospitality, right? Yes. And I bet some of us are pretty good at receiving hospitality, right? Yeah. And as a country or church, or you pick the group, if this were easier to see God in front of us, and to remember that we're seeing God in front of us, well, I'm not sure we would need laws around affirmative action or protected speech or relieving someone else's debt burden. The problem really is with us. Now, maybe not me, and maybe not you, but us writ large. The system this week decided to protect the interests of people who are already at the center of our country's power. Business owners, people who've already paid off their student loans, people who did not need a student loan because they were able to pay for higher education, people who are already overrepresented at elite colleges, white people and white privilege. And these decisions might have been about fairness. But I don't ever hear Jesus preaching about fairness. These decisions lay out who we are as a system and who we honor. Whom do we show hospitality? What rewards are we actually seeking? Jesus knew, and we know, that when we hold up the people at the center with power and privilege over the people with less power and all of those around the margins we are not making decisions that usher in God's kingdom. We heard this morning the last part of Jesus' send-off speech to the disciples in the Gospel of Matthew. He's sending these 12 out to bring God's love to the world. And he says, you are the ones going out, and hopefully someone will welcome you. The disciples hope that people with more power, those who are householders, who have property and thus some wealth, they will allow them to stay and to eat. They will show hospitality, and the disciples will receive it. Will people welcome them? Some will, and some will not. Jesus reminds the disciples that they are part of this bigger plan, part of a big ministry. They are bearers of God, and they are to receive others as if they are equally of God. When someone honors you, then they also honor God with their hospitality. Even those who are seeking and in need themselves are able to offer hospitality to those who have even less. You receive sustenance and shelter, then you give what you have, even if it is as simple and mundane as a drink of water. God will be honored. And as each takes care of those around us, all are taken care of if we're all paying attention. People at the center help those further out, and so on, so that even those who are lacking the basics are taken care of. That's the way the kingdom is supposed to work on earth. Each person, each act, regardless of size, is an active part of making that happen and bringing God's harvest, as we heard. The harvest takes everyone. The message that Winnie read to us said, we are intimately linked in this harvest work. Which reminds me of my work at Ceres, where I volunteer in the garden with the teens. We have a new shift of teens every day, Monday through Thursday, and this happens for 2 weeks because they rotate. And so they're only in the garden every other week. And so there is this joint ownership over the garden. Sometimes we'll work on a project and we won't quite get it done, and it feels bad to me as someone who likes to get things done to walk away, right? I don't want to leave my mess. And yet other times I'll walk into the garden and I'll have this blissful day of just harvesting things plants I've never touched before. And I think, well, that was fun. I didn't have to work at all for that. And there is a way that together, from the fastest, most experienced adult to our youth who's having serious difficulties paying attention or caring about being there, every one of those people makes an impact on the garden and helps put the plants in the ground and care for them, and yes, helps with that harvest. Everyone counts. And just like that rotation of young gardeners at Ceres, when we work together, we may not see what the other is doing, but we work with our awareness that God's kingdom and dream will all have enough if we're all working towards it together. The harvest will come in, and that harvest will be enough. Now, we may not sit in prestigious halls, but we can look deeply at the people whom we encounter. And we can look at the structures around us with new appreciation and receive or offer small acts filled with genuine compassion. For it takes all of those moments. It takes all of those moments to bring in the harvest. So let us work together and keep our hands open for the work ahead. So may it be.